So I was targeting 15 and younger, which is mostly would be like ages 10 up through 15. And what I found very shockingly to me was that there does not seem to be any statistical difference in the likelihood of there being some sort of maternal mortality situation in women that are pregnant at that age versus women that are pregnant older when they are receiving the same quality of health care. In other words, there was this epic review, and we'll put it in the comments. It was a literature review in the Journal of Family Planning and Reproductive Health Care. Mm-hmm. And what they were trying to figure out is what is actually causing there to be worse health outcomes for young women, very young women, children that are pregnant. Yeah. And what they were seeing is that all of the additional factors, mainly the risks that they were seeing as being like always told that these are going to be the things that are higher risk in very young pregnant women, were anemia and hypertension. Those are the two major risks. Mm-hmm. When they were actually studying why those girls were experiencing those, they realized that it had absolutely nothing to do with their age and purely due to the fact that they weren't actually getting quality health care, mainly because of their socioeconomic status or because of the social stigma around them being pregnant. Wow. So if you had a girl who was 13 and pregnant and you had a woman who was, 25 and pregnant, and they received the same quality of health care, the girl who was 13 had no higher risk of absolutely anything than the girl who was 25. It was all to do with the fact that she wasn't regularly getting doctor's appointments, she wasn't taking prenatal vitamins, she wasn't having the kinds of testing done that was being done on the 25-year-old just because she wasn't seeing good doctors often enough. And so if they controlled for that, which was the original problem, is a lot of the original studies that were causing some of this panic that this literature review was also going over was seeing that they were not controlling for all of those variables. And when they did that, they were discovering that it was really that socioeconomic factor and the social stigma that was causing these kinds of issues. So it was a fascinating study. As I said, we'll link to it in the description, or a fascinating literature review, I should say. We'll link to it in the description. It was specifically looking at 11 different studies. And that also led me to the International Journal of Epidemiology, which basically had come up with the exact same conclusion. They were saying that, and I quote, multiple large studies that suggest that young age is not an important determinant of pregnancy outcome or future health of the mother. It is not the age that's the issue. It's the other kinds of health care that they are receiving. And so I think that's really important to note here, that there doesn't seem to be as much of an issue with the age. It's not automatically a life of the mother. Just because someone is 11 doesn't mean we have to say it's impossible for them to give birth. This becomes a life of the mother scenario. We need to be providing them with excellent health care, and we need to be getting rid of all these barriers that seem to be preventing most young children that become pregnant from getting that health care. But it's not going to mean an instantaneous, this girl could die. And presume
Dr. Christina Francis and I were on a call with some legislators earlier this week, and they actually asked her that question. And she said, a D&C or a D&E procedure has such a high risk of perforating the uterus of a young child. They absolutely would not recommend that. Wow. It would be an induction of labor type of situation.
Because a lot of girls at that age have a big enough, essentially, the actual world is a diagonal conjugate. Didn't know what that was until last night. But they already have basically big enough space in their pelvis to pass a child through there. You technically want 11 to 12 centimeters in there. And if you have any petite woman, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I'm very small. I am 5'1". And I still make this requirement, and I am the size of most middle schoolers. Yeah. And so there is an automatic thing that's going to happen if you go to an OBGYN, and this is back to these girls needing really quality health care. They need to be regularly seeing a doctor. But an OBGYN who knows what they're doing is automatically, literally your very first exam, when they find out that you're pregnant, they're going to measure your diagonal conjugate. How they do that, I have no idea, but apparently they do. And if it is at least 11 centimeters, they're we're good. Not worried about you. If it is not, they're going to keep monitoring it and monitoring basically the weight of the baby. And if they figure out that this isn't going to work, it's not going to get through there, it's not big enough, and the child is too big, then they're just going to schedule a C-section right off the bat. So this is basically something that they're very used to dealing with. Because a petite woman like myself has just about an equal likelihood of this being an issue as a 12-year-old. And so it's not something that they're saying is more likely to happen in a teenager. And also we know how to deal with it. It doesn't cause any sort of maternal death.
Right.
It's not going to be popular to say, yeah, there's probably going to be some teenagers that need to have a C-section.
Right.
Like, that's not a popular thing to say, and I get that. And that's so we're going to have to treat that really carefully in an apologetics type conversation.
Yeah.
But it isn't any different than me. Like, an 11-year-old receiving quality health care and me receiving quality health care if I was pregnant are going to have the same risks of these kinds of things happening. So that's